Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining our session on the topic of a performance book of record. I'm Rich Mailhos, a principal consultant from Meradia, and today I'm joined by my colleague, Mark.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Mark David, and I'm Director of Performance Risk and Analytics at Meradia. Meradia has been around since 1997 and has been providing strategic industry and implementation services to the investment management industry. Our team of experts has an unparalleled reputation for excellence, leading and executing transformational initiatives in the front office operations and technology organizations of our asset management, asset owner, insurance, wealth management, and family office clients.
Well, today we're going to explore the question of what is a performance book of record and why is it relevant now? Well, given the popularity of the investment book of record, performance book of record is a timely subject to explore. Mark, how did we arrive with all these books of records at our client sites?
Historically, we started with the accounting book of record. I'm not even sure that it's been that long that we called it that, since it was the only book of record around. But the front office needed something different. They needed something that primarily for them gave them at the start of day or even intraday a very accurate picture of their positions and cash holdings, so that they could make decisions accordingly without having to wait, for example, for T+1 or even T+2 data. They needed T+0, and they needed that data effective as of trade date, not settlement date like the accounting book would do. They also, very importantly, worked on an exposure basis when they were working with derivatives, whereas accounting systems would portray derivatives as having zero or marginal market value. The front office needed to see what was going on in terms of their exposure to the market and their leverage of that exposure. Plus, as someone who's done a lot of work with performance and also worked on IBOR systems, in my experience, I always tried to make sure that those IBORs fulfilled all those purposes, but at the same time, were going to be ready and fit for performance, because everyone knows well, I guess not everyone knows, Rich, how many clients, how many firms have you seen where you've gone in there to talk about performance and they've already built an IBOR and built it with the point of view of having start of day positions available, and then someone turned around and said, all right, let's calculate performance from this, but it was well away from being fit for that purpose. Has that happened to you?
Yeah, I've absolutely seen that in multiple scenarios at client sites. Yeah, I think that's a situation where requirements when a program's being established are too narrowly defined, or just the short-term expectations outweigh the long-term needs. I also think that front office activities are just moving too fast for the projects or the back office capabilities of today or yesterday, and we have to expect that there's going to be a gap between what middle office or front office can support and what's the latest investment activity that an asset manager might be undertaking. Like take, for example, the popularity of the term loan market. This could be coming off of a completely different book of record than marketable securities, for example. And this is a common challenge where firms have multiple books of record, multiple accounting books of record, and sometimes multiple investment books of record as well. One for a specialized asset class and another for common sort of publicly traded instruments. We see this at various types of clients, both asset managers and asset owners. And it's a challenge managing different sources of data to derive a consistent performance return for assets and a consistent methodology as well. That's not always the case. That oftentimes when there's different asset classes, there are different performance measurement methodologies that are employed for one asset class versus another. For example, time weighted versus money weighted for a private asset versus a publicly traded asset. So these are significant operational and data challenges that performance teams have to undertake, and this is why I think a performance book of record is so relevant for today's asset managers. There's a significant operational extension that needs to be carried out beyond the accounting process or the investment book of record process that extends into broader exposures, like you've been mentioning, the economic views, the notional economic views, or the need to look through an asset to its underlying holdings and devise what a contribution to return is that's broader than your direct holdings. It could be based on underlying holdings. And other sort of customized forms of slicing and dicing of classifications for both strategic benchmark relative reporting reasons, or for different aggregations based on, let's say, client householding, for example. But I think the book of record that we're talking about, a performance book of record, is so relevant and so important to help manage these data challenges and to enable powerful analytics and insightful things like attribution. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on how attribution is enabled in firms and how it's challenged when they do not have a strong performance book of record in place.
Good question. I think it really segues from. I like your point about how where a firm can have narrow focus and a siloed focus when they are building IBORs. Performance just doesn't tolerate that. Performance has to look at all of the assets and all the asset classes and expand those. Attribution expands that focus, that view, I think, even further, in that you can do a consistent performance measurement across all your asset classes and all your portfolios with just a minimal PBOR, but with attribution, you've got so much more that you have to throw into that mix. Most glaringly obvious are benchmarks. You've got to integrate benchmark and benchmark constituent level data when you do that. It's not just benchmark levels. And in order to do the attribution properly, there's a significant challenge, which I think many firms, when they take this on, are initially unaware of integrating that security master, integrating those benchmark constituents into the security master, so that Apple in your portfolio has exactly the same ID or set of IDs as it does in the benchmark or multiple benchmarks. And that's a huge challenge that many firms are not aware they need to take on. Besides the benchmark data, there's often analytic data, depending on your attribution methodology, particularly in fixed income. You're going to need durations, convexities, credit spreads, optionality, analytics. You'll also probably need FX market data or market data of many sorts, but particularly internationally, you're going to need FX market data, and you're going to need interest rate data for valuing those securities and measuring attributing and decomposing the performance of them. Finally, more and more attribution systems now are taking less of I'd say a generic approach to attribution, the standards Brinson methodologies or Lord for fixed income, and branching out and tailoring their attribution to their specific investment process. So we're seeing things now like process-based attribution, strategy-based attribution, decision-based attribution. All of these require enriching, enhancing the minimal data set with data and tagging and intentional data that derives from the front office and needs to be attached to that performance data in order to do the attribution that measures what they do to make a value add. So those are those are the major challenges that that a firm will face, trying to implement a really robust PBOR. But Rich, I know you think it goes beyond just performance and attribution. Once you've invested all this effort into building a really pristine, high quality, gold copy set of this data, what applications does it have elsewhere in the firm?
Yeah, I think it has many applications throughout an asset manager or an asset owner. I've seen scenarios where a performance book of record has improved management reporting, reporting into the sort of corporate structure of an asset owner, for example. We've seen where a performance book of record can improve reporting along management and compliance needs, as well as sort of the demand for regulatory reporting that seems to be increasing each year. I also think that there's a great investment that an organization will have made in a performance book of record, one that has dropped or sort of broken down the siloed views of information. Once you have a centralized store of valuable information, I think that the uses for it will start to grow beyond the original intent. The original intent might have been to facilitate a more sort of enriched attribution reporting process, for example. But the side benefits could be, greater client reporting, more consistent management of data for the enterprise as a whole. Perhaps there's a scenario where a benchmark is being used by multiple parts of the organization, but it could be loaded or managed in different ways with different classifications or characteristics. And this is something that wouldn't be identifiable without a more central approach to reporting. And I think this is where performance teams truly benefit from coordinating with a data governance program at a firm. To both manage things like you described, security cross-reference properly, because the data that a performance book of record looks to bring in-house goes way beyond purely, I think, accounting or performance. It really goes into the holistic enterprise-wide data that an asset manager must keep track of for both a clear view of the start of day, a clear view of history, and an actionable set of reportable data to clients at any point in time. So Mark, what do you think is next on the horizon for a performance book of record?
That's a good point, Rich, that although the PBOR is putatively for performance, that it really represents the most granular, the most detailed, the most accurate view of what's really going on in every portfolio, and does that consistently throughout the organization. I think the most challenging thing that we're going to have to deal with PBOR in the future is, I touched on slightly before, the more bespoke attribution methodologies where you're tailoring an attribution measurement methodology to a specific investment process. And which that tailoring inherently requires storing and relating data that originates at the desk, originates from the PM or from the trader, and has to be stored right alongside the more standard performance data of returns, weights, and contributions. And it's been a challenge as more and more clients want to move that direction. It's been a challenge to adapt some of the vendor systems to be able to do that. They're more attuned to implementing one of 4 different lists on a menu items on a list of attribution methodologies that the client needs to pick from. I think the vendors and the design of the PBOR database itself, at its very core, need to recognize that there are client-specific items originating on the desk that need to be tagged, so to speak, with those returns, weights, and contributions. And that goes to the heart of PBOR design in the future, I think.
Thank you, Mark. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that There's other opportunities, I think, to benefit from building a performance book of record. I think that some of the new frontiers will be in the areas of risk analysis, enabling that, given the historical data store that a performance book of record establishes. I think that's an incredibly valuable base of data that risk management teams can take advantage of, as well as we've mentioned, sort of compliance and corporate reporting needs. So thank you, Mark, for this time today. I think we've just touched on this subject. I think there's a lot more we could probably dig into. So I want to thank you for taking the time to talk through this with me.
Thank you, Rich, for being here. And also, we'd like to thank TSAM for collaborating with us on this video, and hope everyone was able to pull some value out of it.
Thank you.